It started like any other debate, until Jasmine Crockett flipped the entire room. One brutal line. One fearless truth. And Laura Ingraham? Speechless. The audience didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just froze, stunned at what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just a clapback, it was a political takedown no one saw coming. What happens when one of the most powerful voices in Congress faces off against one of the most controversial TV hosts in America? The ultimate showdown. Jasmine Crockett absolutely destroys Laura Ingraham live on air. This wasn't just a debate, it was a game-changer. Stay tuned to see how Crockett shut it down and left Ingraham speechless. You won't believe your eyes. From the moment the debate was announced, it was clear sparks were going to fly. On one side of the stage stood Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a fierce voice from Texas known nationwide for her sharp wit, unapologetic defense of truth, and her ability to stand toe-to-toe with anyone, no matter their power or platform. On the other side? Laura Ingraham, the longtime Fox News anchor known for her fiery commentary, aggressive debate style, and highly controversial takes on race, immigration, and American identity. The topic that night was one that has defined many political battle lines in recent years: race in America, systemic inequality, and how media shapes public opinion. It wasn't just a debate, it was a cultural collision between two completely different Americas. And everyone watching could feel it. The room was buzzing long before the cameras started rolling. Political junkies, journalists, and influencers filled the seats. People weren't just expecting a debate, they were expecting a war of words, a face-off that would spill over onto social media, cable news, and dinner tables across the country. And they weren't disappointed. From the very start, it was obvious that this wouldn't be a typical back-and-forth exchange. There was a weight to the moment. Jasmine walked onto the stage with quiet confidence, dressed in bold, unapologetic colors, her eyes steady and focused. Laura entered with her usual media-trained polish, flanked by her signature smirk and the kind of poise that comes from years of sitting behind a desk with full control of the narrative. But this time, she wasn't behind a desk. This time, there was no earpiece, no teleprompter, no friendly set or curated audience. This was neutral ground, and it would soon become Jasmine Crockett's battlefield. The moderator opened with a question that set the tone for the night: how has race shaped the current state of American politics, and are today's leaders helping or hurting that conversation? Before anyone could blink, Laura jumped in. She was ready. She spoke with practiced ease, suggesting that Democrats had weaponized race, that politicians like Jasmine were using identity politics to distract from policy failures. She threw out phrases like playing the victim, division, and agenda-driven activism. It was classic Ingraham, loud, confident, and calculated to trigger. But what happened next set the tone for the rest of the debate, and for everything that would follow. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt. She didn't even roll her eyes. She simply waited. And then, with the calmness of someone who had heard it all before, she leaned forward and replied. You want to talk about division? You want to talk about weaponizing identity? Laura, your entire career is built on pushing fear. Fear of immigrants. Fear of black voices. Fear of change. The crowd reacted instantly. A few claps. A couple gasps. But mostly, silence. The kind of silence that hits a room when people realize, oh, this just got real. From there, Crockett took control, not with volume, but with clarity. She began laying out the stakes, real stats on voter suppression, real stories from constituents who faced racial profiling, and real examples of how media manipulation fuels hatred and misunderstanding. She didn't just speak, she educated. And she did it without sounding like she was giving a lecture. She was telling the truth in a way that was raw, relatable, and impossible to ignore. Laura tried to interrupt, but Crockett wouldn't let her reframe the conversation. Instead of being dragged into a shouting match, Jasmine steered the ship with poise. And here's the moment people will never forget. Halfway through the segment, Laura made a snide remark about how Democrats cry racism every time they lose an argument. A line she'd used before. One she thought would land. But it didn't. Instead, Jasmine hit back with one of the most cutting responses of the night. "We don't cry racism, we call it out. You just don't like hearing it when it doesn't come from someone you can ignore." The audience held their breath. The energy in the room shifted. This wasn't a clash of egos anymore, it was a reckoning. A powerful voice standing up to years of gaslighting, misrepresentation, and media manipulation. Laura tried to regain her footing, but it was too late. Jasmine had already taken the high ground, and she wasn't giving it back. What made this moment so powerful wasn't just that Crockett won the exchange. It was that she did it without stooping low, without shouting, and without ever abandoning her message. She came in with purpose, she defended her community, and she refused to let lies slide unchecked. It was more than a debate, it was a masterclass. By the time the first segment ended, it was clear who had command of the stage. Laura may have had years of TV experience. But Jasmine had the truth. And truth doesn't need permission to be powerful, it just needs a voice loud enough to carry. And that night? Jasmine Crockett was that voice. It didn't take long for the tension to boil over. Less than 10 minutes into the debate, Laura Ingraham decided to try and shift the balance with a move straight from her primetime playbook: attack, belittle, then dismiss. As Jasmine Crockett calmly detailed the real-life impact of discriminatory laws, like voter ID restrictions, gerrymandering, and the erosion of affirmative action, Laura interrupted with a smirk and dropped a line that would come to define the tone of the evening. "Maybe if certain members of Congress spent more time working and less time race-baiting," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "this country wouldn't be such a mess." It was the kind of jab that had worked for Laura in countless interviews before. Toss out a loaded accusation, let it land, and move on before the other person can hit back. But tonight, she wasn't dealing with a nervous guest or a panelist afraid of being cut off. She was dealing with Jasmine Crockett, and Jasmine wasn't about to let that comment slide. The audience murmured. A few groans came from the crowd. Even the moderator raised an eyebrow. But Jasmine? She didn't blink. Instead, she leaned slightly forward, narrowed her eyes, and delivered a response so sharp, it sliced through the studio silence. "You mean like the mess your network created, pushing election lies, defending insurrectionists, and gaslighting Black Americans every single night?" The shift in the room was immediate and electrifying. It was the moment the energy flipped, and Crockett seized full control of the narrative. Laura looked stunned, not completely thrown off, but clearly not expecting Crockett to come back swinging with facts and fire. She tried to laugh it off, but the laughter didn't land. Jasmine wasn't joking. "Let's be real," Crockett continued, locking eyes with her opponent. "You're not upset about race baiting. You're upset that Black women like me have the mic now, and we're not handing it back." That line echoed. You could feel it hit. The moderator hesitated to move on, sensing something important was unfolding. The audience sat still, hooked on every word. Even those who came in leaning toward Laura's side couldn't ignore the precision with which Jasmine dismantled her argument. This wasn't yelling. This wasn't dramatics. This was calculated, confident, and crushing. Laura tried to push forward. She fired off a quick rebuttal, claiming Jasmine was making everything about race and ignoring the real concerns of everyday Americans. But Jasmine was already locked in, ready for every twist. "Everything about race," she repeated. "Let me tell you what's real to everyday Americans: not being able to vote without jumping through hoops, being pulled over because of your skin color, and being called divisive just for telling the truth. That's not politics. That's reality." The power of that moment came not just from what Jasmine said, but how she said it. There was no raised voice. No finger pointing. Just calm, unwavering intensity. Like someone who's lived through what she's talking about, and won't let anyone minimize it ever again. Laura reached again into her rhetorical toolbox, this time trying to flip the victim card. "So now I'm the bad guy for having a different opinion?" she asked, half laughing. But Jasmine didn't give her the satisfaction. "No," she said. You're the bad guy for spreading dangerous narratives and then acting surprised when people call you out. The crowd began to shift. The energy was no longer split, it was leaning. People could see who was bringing substance, and who was spinning headlines. From that point forward, Laura never truly recovered. She kept trying, tossing out interruptions, pivoting, even changing subjects, but the momentum had changed. Her usual tricks didn't land. Jasmine was in complete control. It was a rare thing to witness, someone who not only defended their truth but exposed the playbook of someone who's made a career out of avoiding accountability. And as the debate moved forward, it became crystal clear, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just winning this moment. She was making history with it. After Laura Ingraham's failed attempt to derail the conversation with her low blow, she tried a new approach, pivot to victimhood. It's a tactic she's used countless times on her own show, frame herself as being silenced or attacked just for offering a different viewpoint. But Jasmine Crockett was several steps ahead. She knew exactly where Laura was going and didn't hesitate to meet her there, with precision and power. As Laura began another monologue about how race is being weaponized to divide Americans, Jasmine remained calm. She didn't interrupt. She didn't scoff. She just listened, then dropped what would become the most shared moment of the night. You think talking about racism is divisive? That's because you've never had to live with it, she said plainly. You confuse discomfort with oppression. But what you're feeling right now, it's called accountability. Boom. The crowd was locked in. Even the moderator was clearly affected. This wasn't just a clapback. This was a teaching moment. One laced with facts, grounded in experience, and impossible to ignore. Laura tried to deflect. She rolled her eyes and accused Jasmine of playing the race card, calling it a distraction from the real issues that affect working-class Americans. But Jasmine had receipts. You mean real issues like the wage gap? Redlining? Mass incarceration? Or maybe the fact that black women make 64 cents to every white man's dollar? She didn't pause for applause. She wasn't performing. She was informing and dominating. Then came the stats. Jasmine cited exact figures on police brutality, systemic voter suppression in southern states, and the impact of healthcare disparities on minority communities. She even referenced legislation by name, pointing to bills that Laura's party either blocked or twisted in the media. This isn't about race baiting, she said. It's about calling things what they are. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask why. Laura, now visibly flustered, attempted one more tactic, questioning Jasmine's integrity. She asked, so are you saying only your lived experience matters? What about people like me who see this country differently? Jasmine didn't hesitate. I'm saying lived experience and facts both matter. But when you use your platform to dismiss one and twist the other, that's not a difference of opinion. That's dishonesty. It was clear, Crockett wasn't just defending herself, she was defending every voice that's been drowned out by media figures like Ingraham. Every person told their truth doesn't matter. Every voter told their rights are secure when they're being stripped away. Every American told they're too sensitive when they're just speaking up. And that's what made her performance so devastating. She didn't shout. She didn't insult. She out-argued. She out-fact. She outclassed. What Laura came with was attitude and sound bites. What Jasmine brought was truth, data, and dignity. As the debate continued, the contrast became even sharper. Laura began repeating herself, throwing around phrases like woke culture and cancel mobs, trying to rile the audience back in her favor. But it wasn't working. Because while Laura was stuck in political theater, Jasmine was grounding the conversation in real life. You're talking about buzzwords, Crockett said, while I'm talking about black kids getting suspended 3 times more often than white kids for the same behavior. You want to argue feelings, I came to talk facts. At one point, even the moderator seemed to pivot toward Jasmine, asking for her thoughts on how media coverage affects public perception of race and justice. Her response was blunt and unforgettable. People don't fear the truth. They fear losing control of the narrative. And that's what this is really about. For years, certain voices dominated the mic. Now that more of us are speaking, suddenly it's a problem. The studio fell quiet. No comeback from Laura. Just the echo of Crockett's clarity ringing in every corner. And social media? It exploded. Clips of Jasmine's responses were already circulating before the debate even ended. Twitter was ablaze with hashtags like #CrockettWithTheFacts and #LauraGotRead. TikTok edits showed side-by-side reactions, Jasmine calm and composed, Laura visibly shaken. People weren't just watching, they were learning, retweeting, and reposting. It wasn't about left or right anymore. It was about truth versus spin. Reality versus the illusion. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win the round, she flipped the script on how these debates are supposed to go. She didn't just survive the moment, she redefined it. And Laura? She sat frozen, for once not behind a desk, not in control, and not able to rewrite what just happened. Her silence said more than any spin ever could. As the debate edged toward its final round, the tension in the room was almost unbearable. Viewers online were glued to their screens, social media feeds were exploding with reactions, and even the moderator seemed to sense something was building. Jasmine Crockett had already delivered several blows, calm, surgical, and impossible to refute. Laura Ingraham, once the most confident voice on that stage, was visibly rattled, trying to regain footing but getting nowhere. But no one was prepared for what was coming next. The moderator asked the final question, clearly trying to bring the conversation to a close. In closing, how can political leaders and media figures better represent all Americans without creating further division? Laura jumped in first, perhaps hoping she could still control the narrative with one last monologue. She began in typical form, measured tone, confident delivery, careful framing. She claimed she loved America, that she wanted unity, and that people like Jasmine Crockett don't speak for all Black Americans. It was a line meant to draw the crowd back in, to remind them of her position as the reasonable voice, the one advocating for unity while subtly undermining Jasmine's authority. But Jasmine didn't let that line breathe for even a second. She turned her chair slightly, faced Laura directly, and said, in a tone so clear, so composed, it felt like a thunderclap. "No, I don't speak for all Black Americans. But I speak for the ones your network tries so hard to silence." The room froze. Not a single sound. Just stunned silence. The kind of silence that says, something powerful just happened. Jasmine wasn't yelling. She wasn't emotional. She didn't need to be. Every word landed like a hammer, and there was no dodging it. No fast-talking spin or clever deflection could save Laura now. Even her facial expression changed. For the first time all night, Ingraham looked small, not because of the spotlight, but because of what it revealed. But Jasmine wasn't done. She continued, voice unwavering. "I don't speak for everyone, but I speak from truth. I speak from the experience of people who've been ignored, dismissed, and disrespected by people with your platform. People who've been told they're angry just for demanding to be seen. People who've been blamed for division when they're simply asking for justice." She paused, just long enough to let it settle, then dropped the final blow. "You don't get to gaslight a nation and then ask for unity. Not on my watch." The audience broke. Applause erupted, not the polite kind, but the spontaneous, raw kind that happens when someone says exactly what everyone's been thinking but was too afraid to say. Laura tried to speak, but the moderator stepped in. "Let's give her the floor," he said, trying to maintain order. But it didn't matter. The moment was already sealed. That moment, the silence after Jasmine's words, followed by the thunder of applause, became the most viral clip of the entire event. Dozens of different angles were posted online, all showing the exact second Laura Ingraham realized she had completely lost the room. Some commenters called it a mic drop. Others called it a masterclass. But everyone agreed, Jasmine Crockett didn't just win, she dominated. And what made that moment so historic wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. No shouting. No insults. Just unapologetic truth delivered with elegance, confidence, and undeniable power. Even political analysts who typically shy away from choosing sides admitted it was one of the most powerful closer moments they'd seen in a live debate. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't scripted. It was authentic, and it crushed. Later that night, clips of the exchange flooded Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. Influencers, news hosts, celebrities, and even rival politicians shared the video, quoting Jasmine's final line. "You don't get to gaslight a nation and then ask for unity." It trended within minutes. Even people who weren't familiar with Crockett before the debate now knew her name. She became a symbol, not just of resistance, but of leadership. Someone who refused to be silenced, someone who didn't fold under pressure, and someone who knew how to speak truth to power without ever raising her voice. Meanwhile, Laura Ingraham's team issued a vague post online calling the debate spirited, but no amount of spin could undo what the world had already seen. There was no editing the live moment. There was no walking it back. And that's what made it so rare, and so unforgettable. In politics, especially in debates, it's easy to get caught in theater. But every now and then, someone rises above the performance and speaks directly to the heart of the people. Jasmine Crockett did that. In that moment, she wasn't just a congresswoman, she was a mirror to a system that for too long protected people like Laura Ingraham from accountability. And for millions watching, that moment didn't just hit, it shifted something. As the debate came to a close, there wasn't the usual polite round of applause or forced handshake between the speakers. There was only energy, raw, electric, and undeniable. The air in the room buzzed with what everyone had just witnessed. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just responded to Laura Ingraham's attacks, she had dismantled them piece by piece, with facts, fire, and fearlessness. And the moment it ended, the world reacted. Within minutes, Twitter, now called X, was on fire. Hashtags began trending almost instantly. Hashtag Crockett clapback, hashtag Laura silenced, hashtag Jasmine unleashed, and hashtag Gaslight no more surged to the top of political and national trends. Clips of Crockett's mic drop moment, "You don't get to gaslight a nation and then ask for unity," were being uploaded, edited, shared, and reposted by the second. One clip posted by a political influencer hit 1 million views in under an hour. TikTok users wasted no time adding music, remixes, and text overlays to Jasmine's calm takedown. Young activists stitched her speech into their own videos. Even non-political creators joined in, using her lines as motivational sound bites. The moment transcended politics, it became a cultural flashpoint. On YouTube, creators from all political sides began uploading reaction videos. Some titled their uploads, "Watch, Jasmine Crockett ends Laura Ingraham's career live." "Debate shocker, Ingraham exposed and silenced by Crockett." That look on Laura's face says it all. Even conservative commentators had to admit it, Laura got cooked. A few tried to spin it, calling Jasmine aggressive or performative, but the truth was too loud to ignore. She had spoken with clarity, strength, and a level of control that even her critics couldn't deny. Meanwhile, mainstream media outlets jumped in. CNN ran a headline the next morning. "Jasmine Crockett's viral moment leaves Laura Ingraham speechless." MSNBC aired an entire segment analyzing the exchange. Even late-night hosts joined in, with clips of the debate making it onto monologues on The Daily Show and Late Night with Seth Meyers. But beyond the views and headlines, something deeper was happening. People were inspired. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just being celebrated for owning someone on stage. She was being recognized for the substance behind her words, for bringing receipts, for refusing to be minimized, and for showing what leadership looks like when it's backed by purpose. In the comments of every post, you could see it. Finally, someone who gets it. She didn't yell, she just told the truth. "I showed this to my daughter. She needs to see this kind of power." Meanwhile, Laura Ingraham? Her official social media accounts stayed relatively quiet. No clips. No quotes. No triumphant recap of her performance. Just a carefully worded tweet. Grateful to have had a spirited discussion tonight. Always proud to stand for what I believe. But everyone could read between the lines. That wasn't pride. That was damage control. Even some of her followers expressed disappointment, commenting things like, "Laura got steamrolled tonight. She wasn't ready for Crockett. Big L." Political forums and Reddit threads lit up with frame-by-frame breakdowns of the debate. Users dissected every exchange, every reaction shot, every word. It was clear that Jasmine Crockett had emerged not just as the winner of a debate, but as a force in the culture. Her own team leaned into the momentum. Within hours, her campaign account posted a short clip of her final lines, caption only. "We're not being silent anymore." Merchandise sites popped up overnight selling t-shirts with quotes like, "Not on my watch. I speak for the silenced. Crockett 2026? People weren't just watching, they were joining in. And the impact wasn't just online. The day after the debate, news broke that Crockett's office had received a huge spike in grassroots donations, mostly in $10 and $20 amounts from young, first-time donors who said they saw her video and felt compelled to act. This moment was more than viral, it was transformative. For too long, debates like these had followed the same script, a powerful media figure throwing jabs, a politician defending themselves cautiously, the audience left wondering who really won. But Jasmine flipped that script entirely. She didn't just play defense, she went on offense. Not with personal attacks, but with bold truths and bulletproof composure. She made it clear, this wasn't just about politics. It was about presence, power, and representation. And whether you loved her or hated her, one thing was undeniable. Jasmine Crockett left that stage as a new kind of voice, one that couldn't be ignored, silenced, or spun. They tried to silence her. They tried to twist the truth. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch, she stood tall, calm, and crushed every false narrative in her path. This wasn't just a win, it was a warning. A warning to every voice that thought it could manipulate, distort, and walk away untouched. Crockett proved that facts don't fear the spotlight, and power doesn't need to yell to be heard. If you want more moments like this, if you're done with the noise and ready for the truth, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Union Show, where every debate hits different, and every voice speaks louder.